I'm Manny.
I'm Noah.
And this is Devan. And this is No Such Thing, a show where we settle our dumb arguments and yours by actually doing the research. On today's episode, are suburban dogs happier than city dogs?
I'm a scientist, so I have a lot of trouble giving black and white answers. But if I had to give a black and white answer, I would say...
There's no such thing. No such thing. No such thing. No such thing. No such thing.
Make your income tax, but you just $6 out again. Check it out, spit out.
Hey, this is Devan. Thought this would be a good way to start this week's episode. I'm out walking my dog Ollie. I guess this episode this week is kind of about something I've been grappling with. When I first moved to the city, I was someone who was pretty dead set on not having a dog in the city. I thought it was really sad to see dogs in the city. You know, watching them just like poop on the sidewalk. I thought, like, there's no place for them to really run around. They don't have enough space. The apartments are way too small. But now it's been going on 5 years now that I myself have owned a dog in the city. And I think, you know, COVID was a pretty good time for me to put aside all these preconceived notions I had about dogs in the city because I was bored in a house. But now I'm starting to think about if that was a selfish choice and if I'm really doing the right thing by having my dog Ollie live in the city versus like being in the suburbs or on a farm somewhere.
What made you think about this now?
So we're recording this right after the holidays, and around the holidays, you know, a lot of people go home and bring their dogs with them. So I've been seeing a lot of these TikToks. So I'll share this in a group and I'll have you guys describe them. But at a top level, I'll say these TikToks are people documenting their city dogs going to the suburbs or, let's say, a more rural area.
Ooh, this is nice, girl.
All right, the on-screen text says, when you bring your dog from your apartment to your parents' house for the holidays, and the dog is kind of running around the house, obviously very excited, wagging its tail, perhaps excited at the amount of space that's in there.
That's one. Let's put that into one bucket of videos. The second bucket of videos I'm seeing are people who are moving from the city to the suburbs or a more rural area with their dogs. So let me send you this TikTok.
The caption says, introducing our apartment dog to his new house in his very own backyard. And it is really sweet. You can clearly tell that this dog is so happy about the greenery, and the space, and just being able to sprint. Like, there are no situations in New York that I've seen where a dog can just sprint unless it's at a park.
Yeah, off leash hours, right? It's only a certain amount of time.
At someone's apartment, a dog cannot sprint because it will immediately just be at the other end of the apartment.
We're not in that tax bracket where the dogs can sprint through the apartment. Ollie tries, but so yeah, this stuff has me thinking. I'm at the point in my life where I am in no rush to leave the city. I think I could live the rest of my life living in the city. But I am starting to think and be reminded of this hesitation I had initially about having a dog in a city, where it's like, is he actually living a worse off life in the city because I want a dog and I want to live in the city? Would he be happier if I moved to the suburbs?
And I don't want to make you feel any worse, but you got a big ass dog.
I have a huge dog.
So,
and that was another thing that I said. I said, if I'm going to have a dog in the city, it can't be big. But Ollie is 80 plus pounds. So he's a big boy. And I do wonder if there's enough room for him here if he would enjoy life more if we were in the suburbs. Now, Noah, you also have a dog here.
Yeah, and he hates the city. He's smaller. He's about 30 pounds.
His name's Riz.
His name's Rizzo. And we got him a couple years ago now. And yeah, he's never I think he likes us now, but he hasn't liked the city. You can tell he just doesn't like being outside. He's anxious and he's very just like reactive to noise and stuff. Our man's on Prozac now.
Yeah, Ollie was on Prozac before.
Which I guess helps, but
How do you identify that when the dog needs to take that kind of medication?
like like he would basically, if we take him out on a walk, he'd like shut down and like try to just sit and like really freeze up. And this has helped with that, I think, at least. Okay. But then, we'll take him to Julia's family in Virginia. They have a huge backdoor area fenced in, so we can take him off leash and he runs around there, and it's like, obviously he's having way more fun.
Night and day?
Versus like, we'll try to take him to Prospect Park or something, but he's so nervous, it's more like the walk over there. It takes probably 10, 15 minutes. And he just gets so worked up in there that then like we get there and he just kind of wants to just go home. But when we do take him to that backyard area, he's like running around and doing kind of what we just saw in this TikTok, like this other
It's just
dog.
clearly happier.
Yeah, and just more relaxed and exploring.
So yeah, I guess the question is, knowing what we know now, do we think suburban dogs, on a whole, are happier than city dogs? Manny, we'll start with you since you don't have any dog in this fight.
Yeah, very nice. Very nice. Yeah, just as someone who's like so removed from this, to me, it's kind of a no-brainer. Like, yeah, the more grass, the more space, the dogs are probably going to be happier. But I don't own a dog. Maybe if I had owned a dog, there'd be more nuance to it. To me, it seems like definitely.
Yeah, I think the reason why we're here is because I think I agree.
Another question for me is like, all right, if it does turn out to be the case that suburb dogs are way happier, at what point is it unethical to have a dog in the city?
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a really good point.
And
I think a lot.
Not to put my two dog owning friends on the spot, but I'm just saying, like, I don't think dogs can't be happy in the city.
No.
But are they supposed to be here?
My suspicion would be overall most dogs would be happier with more space, more quiet. Generally, like dogs are individual. Like, not just be a doggo lover, but it's like they are different. So like some dogs can't even see other dogs or they're going to flip out. Allowing that, like, every dog is an individual, I do wonder kind of, all right, if all the basic needs are met, they're getting attention, food, and everything else that makes them happy. I don't know if, on a grander scale, if 1 year in the city would be that much worse necessarily than 1 year in the country. Because, like, I don't think, like, my dog's miserable.
Yeah.
I know if we moved next month, upstate or something and had a backyard, I would see different behavior from him that I would interpret as being happier.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if someone could make an argument that the city is better for any dog.
After the break, we go inside the mind of a dog and see what they see, smell, and know.
No such thing. No such thing.
Okay, we're back.
I'm Manny.
I'm Noah.
This is Devan. So last time we talked, we were trying to figure out if dogs in the city are living worse off lives than dogs who live in the suburbs. So as I was looking into people who study dogs, there was one name that I kept seeing in article after article.
I'm Alexandra Horowitz. I'm Senior Research Fellow of the Dog Cognition Lab at Barnard College.
So Alexandra is one of the leading dog cognition experts in North America. If you read anything about dog cognition, it's either a study she's done or she's being asked to interpret a study that someone else has done. And she's also written an entire book on it. It's called Inside of a Dog, What Dogs See, Smell, and Know. So as I was reading through her book to prepare for this interview, I quickly realized that I knew very little about dogs. I've grown up with dogs my whole life, and I've thought I knew a lot about them. So before we get to our answer, I feel like it would be helpful for us to do a little Spark Note version going through the book and learning a bit more about what dogs see, smell, and know. Chapter 1, How Wolves Became Dogs.
The story of domestication is actually constantly being evolved as we have newer, more powerful ways to study what happened thousands of years ago. Our best guess now, based on genetic evidence, is that dogs diverged from some ancestor wolf, an ancestor of the current gray wolf that you see in North America, probably 14 to 20,000 years ago. There were probably multiple domestication events, meaning different places at different times, and maybe even repeatedly in a place where there was a group of these proto-dogs, or like friendly wolves, who started to distinguish themselves from the other wolves and started to affiliate with people. Probably breeding, intentional breeding, where I pick two dogs I like and I make them breed and I get a new dog that has all the great features of those two dogs. That didn't happen for quite a long time. It was basically just self-selection on the part of these wolves who wanted to be around people, and also some self-selection of people who were agreeable to being around these wolves that started domestication, and eventually it became purebred breeding, and now you have pugs.
I'm having trouble imagining the first guy who was like, I need this thing to be mine, to a fucking wolf. What was wrong with that person?
Wolves are kind of cute.
I mean, no. They look great. They look sick. But I'm saying
They look freaking awesome.
I'd want one, but I wouldn't try to do it.
It's, survival of the fittest sort of thing, where you would be doing a lot more crazy stuff in your life. So
yes.
You would feel maybe more equipped to even tackle that sort of thing.
Exactly.
Good point.
No offense, but I don't, you
No,
wouldn't be able to go out there and...
You're a different type of man.
Yeah, it's like, we had real men back then.
None taken. I've got the softest hands of anyone I know.
Chapter 2, Making Your Dog. So, jumping off of pugs, right? Dog breeds are always a big topic of discussion. Mm-hmm. We as a culture love to associate certain breeds with certain things. Mm. So we think about like how pit bulls have such a bad rap.
XL bullies.
And she has this interesting analogy in her book where she talks about how certain breeds have certain tendencies, and she compares that to addiction in humans.
I'm intrigued.
Yeah, I wonder if it is the best analogy to use. But, people like to think that when you get a purebred dog, you're getting a kind of guaranteed dog whose behavior is guaranteed. If you want a dog to herd your sheep, you're not going to get yourself like a Maltese, right? You're going to get yourself a certain kind of dog who is bred to herd sheep. But no dog comes out of the womb herding sheep, right? They just have a propensity to do types of things, which to us looks like herding sheep, right? To respond to human signaling, to be sensitive to the motion of animals that are sort of sheep-sized, to want to kind of get them all in one place, and importantly, not to predate them, not to kill them. So it has that tendency. You still have to shape that tendency. So for instance, if a sheepdog never meets any sheep, they might do sort of herding-like things with little kids or with people who enter your house, but it's never going to look like sheep herding. And of course, they'll never herd sheep. And similarly with our genetic tendencies, we might have tendencies towards certain behaviors, but if you're never exposed to any instances of that behavior, that tendency won't manifest in the way it will somebody else who is exposed to it, right? And does have an opportunity to take lots of an addictive substance. That person, if they have a tendency to addiction, is more likely to become addicted to the substance. But if they never have the exposure, they're not going to become addicted. For dogs like pit bulls, people think, well, that dog is bred to be aggressive. By the way, it's pit bulls now, but it used to be Doberman Pinscher, It used to be Rottweilers, used to be German Shepherds, right? That says something about us, not about the dogs. And what it says about us is that we have used these dogs in ways which are occasionally aggressive, and therefore the whole breed gets marked as being aggressive. But around the turn of the 20th century, pit bulls were nannies for people's kids. They were seen as gentle, sweet dogs. The dog hasn't changed that much.
I think we've both done a DNA test for our dogs.
Yeah.
In her book, she has a footnote that's basically calling out the accuracy of these tests. So I was a bit worried because these tests are not exactly cheap.
Yeah.
Spent a little bit of money on it.
So did I waste my money getting a DNA test for my dog and being like, oh, I know he's some sort of shepherd mix. I want to see what all the other breeds are.
Well, I wrote it in 2007. It came out in 2009. I'm revising it now. And the DNA tests have advanced considerably since that time. I don't think you wasted your money, but it depends on what you wanted with that. So if you have a very unusual breed or a dog where nobody else with that dog has submitted their dog for DNA analysis, you probably wouldn't get as a result on your dog that it is that breed. They're just looking at similarities of the genome to other breeds they have on file.
Gotcha.
And so even if you get your result and it's like a shepherd pitty mix, let's say, I don't know.
Yes,
That's
you're
very
correct.
quickly.
Yeah.
And then what it's saying is like, some of the genome is very close to shepherds, other shepherds we have on file, people who say they have a German shepherd or a Dutch shepherd. And some of the genome is close to these other dogs' genomes who we have on file where we know it's a Staffordshire Bull Terrier or some other dog, which we call a pitty. And it's similar in that way. But that doesn't mean that the dad of or the mom was a pitty and the dad was a shepherd, right? It means that like overall, they're close. They've got cousins. They got
most similar to
aunts and uncles, and right. It's most similar to.
So she was like, you should think about these tests as like Ancestry.com and not like paternity tests.
Yeah.
Chapter 3, Training Dogs.
There is this world of dog TikTok that is really upset with the current way that people treat dogs. They don't like this new, what they call gentle parenting of dogs, right? They're like, why you shouldn't let your dog in your bed. You got to be the alpha of the pack. If you don't show the dog who's boss, the dog is going to come for you,
Exactly,
right?
yep.
But she says that this you need to be alpha thing is actually based on a huge misconception with wolves.
I wrote the book like over 15 years ago, and this idea is still really sticky idea. It came from, or it was popularized by Cesar Millan.
When good dogs go bad, there's one man who's their best friend, Cesar Millan.
No dog is too much for me to handle.
Who talks about that as part of his philosophy, that wolves live in packs where there's an alpha. And so, again, looking at natural behavior of relatives, which makes sense in some cases for some reasons, and saying like, so in your pack, in your house, you have to be the alpha of your dog. Otherwise, they'll sort of be the alpha of you. Unfortunately, it's super wrong. And what's wrong is, at the time, that's how we thought wolf packs lived. That's because it was hard to study wolves in the wild because this was pre-GPS, etc. So people studying wolves studied captive wolves. And in particular, a guy named Schenkel studied a bunch of captive wolves who were just coincidentally, I guess, mostly like teenage male wolves. And they were captive and they were in a small enclosure. And what he observed through looking at their behavior is that they formed a little bit of a dominance hierarchy where there were some wolves, he called them the alphas, who would eat first, right, who'd get the first new resource, etc., could sleep where they wanted, etc. And then there were other wolves who kind of like tried to fight them for that position when they were prepared, sort of the beta wolves. So it was a power struggle is what he saw. But as it turned out, when people started actually studying wolves in the wild, they observed that actually wolves live in family packs. They're not a bunch of teenage boys hanging out together in a small space. Instead, they're families, which is great. It actually makes it easy for dogs to kind of fit in our family, where if there's an alpha, that's just the parents. Yeah, I mean, parents are alphas in a way. They sort of control, but they don't control through violence. And the young are not trying to overtake the parents ever, right? Like the parents' control is about like keeping the family unit together. The parents' control is because they know how things go. So wolves live in family units with their young and maybe their young's young. And there is no dominance hierarchy that the way that people are thinking. So the alpha pack idea that then we should bring this antiquated idea of wolf behavior into our living with dogs is bananas. At best, it's just a weird idea. At worst, it's like just cruel and is leading to this ridiculous relationship with your dog where you're punishing them for no reason. So it's going to create a fear-based relationship. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's bad. I'm sorry to hear it's still on TikTok making the rounds. Yeah,
it is, but I feel like it's evolving, right? And like I think about even now, like the way I'm raising my dog versus like growing up in the way like my dad would talk about the family dog, right? For like you're saying, for me, it's more so like how do I keep you safe and under control? But there is still this sect of people basically being like, if you don't dominate your dog will dominate you.
Yeah, which has never happened. Dogs don't dominate people. Dogs, out of fear or fright or excitement, might bite, might try to grab food out of your hand, whatever. It's not dominating, you know? They're not ready to take control of the household, take on the taxes, drive the car. They're not trying to do that stuff. They are trying to understand how to live in a human household, and it's not obvious to dogs. They're a whole nother species. I find it super paradoxical that we want to live with dogs because they are not human, right? Because they are different, they act differently, and then for some reason we don't want to let them be dogs.
Yeah.
We're worried about them being dogs. There is a balance to be struck, as you're saying. You still have to, if you're living in dogs around other people, you still have to make sure they don't injure other people. So there's some kind of control or managing or just understanding that you need to impart to them. But it's not, you don't need to dominate them. They're not going to dominate you. And that's a shame.
That's really interesting. This was kind of the foundational like structure of Cesar Million's like teachings in that show.
It was all about being the alpha and showing the dogs who's boss. And look, he got results, right? And I don't even think she would deny that he got results, but I think what she's saying, it's like it's fear-based results, right? Like the dog is only doing the thing because it is afraid of you.
Yeah.
It is not doing the thing because it thinks it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Chapter 4, the senses.
So dogs have this really cool way of breathing.
Their whole anatomy is constructed to kind of enable them to smell the world. They're really good sniffers. They can sniff like 7 times a second, whereas if we do that, we would hyperventilate. When you get a smell in your nose and you want to get rid of it, we know how to do that. You like exhale the smell, like you sort of shoot it out your nose as best you can. But dogs, if they're seeing the world through smell, they don't want to shoot that image out of their nose, right? So they actually exhale through the side slits of their nose, those little slits, which you can visibly see on your dog. And that allows them to kind of continue to let odors come in through the nares, the main nostril.
So that's why they're better at following scents and trails and that sort of thing.
Wow.
That's interesting.
And she talks about it in terms of like thinking about us blinking.
So it would be sort of like with vision, if you needed to take these really long blinks, you know, as long as your eyes were open, you need to blink them shut. We don't. We blink very briefly. Why? Because closing our eyes disappears the world suddenly. For them, sending odors out their nose means they're not getting any information about the smells of the world. So they have this continual stream and they exhale separately. And that exhale actually also sort of stirs up odors, more odors, maybe from the ground that could be rushed into their nose. So that's very cool.
So studies show that trained dogs can actually smell out cancer at pretty high rates.
Wow, cancer.
Yeah, if they're trained, you know, obviously they have to be trained
to
know what cancer smells like. They're not.
I didn't know cancer had a smell.
It does
for dogs,
and dogs are pretty good at detecting it.
Wow.
I guess if they can smell drugs, why not?
Yeah, why not cancer?
Why not cancer?
More
do something good.
Probably
for
more
us.
helpful. Exactly.
Yeah. Stop finding my drugs.
Start finding my cancer.
And their whole anatomy is really constructed to allow them to smell more richly than we do, which is not to say they don't have great vision as well. Their vision is fine. They have 2-color vision.
They're not colorblind?
They are not colorblind.
What?
They're not colorblind.
What's their vision like? Is there
crazy?
What?
How does their vision compare to ours?
They can have a wider peripheral field than we do, so they can see more out of the sides. The science clearly shows they have 2-color vision. Sort of maybe like what it's like for us at dusk, when the bright colors of the outdoors become just sort of muted. And they actually have a faster flicker fusion rate than we do, which means like the rate at which their eyes turn the series of snapshots that we're taking all the time into the feeling of smooth motion. And the result of that is that they can notice things that flicker because they're designed for human eyes, like fluorescent lights. They notice them flickering. So their perceptual world between the smell and the vision, just getting a glimpse at that, you start to see like, oh yeah, they're living in like a slightly parallel universe to ours. What they're gonna notice and be concerned with and care about is gonna be a little different than us staring at our screens, right? Things like that. That's, some dogs will look at a screen, but that's not going to be mostly engaging to them. Now, if it were an odor screen and odors were shooting out of there, thumbs up.
The kind of frame rate thing is interesting. I'm surprised to hear that.
I wonder if someone has made they have
Movie
TV
for
for dogs? There's like a channel, it's like TV for
Yeah.
dogs, or there's some YouTube videos
sure.
too. I wonder if they changed the frame rate on
They
this.
should. I mean, yeah, they better.
If they're with it.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I hope so for the dog's sake. I mean, I hate seeing when you go to some people's houses and they have the motion smoothing on.
Oh my God.
Watching a regular movie or something. Does your dog watch TV?
Not really. If there's a certain noise,
Yeah,
he'll look
Rizzo's the
over,
same way,
like
yeah.
crying babies,
What about
dogs barking.
Yeah.
He'll look at and sort of turn his head at.
Chapter 5. What a dog knows.
All right, so now this takes us to a little segment I'm going to call Is Ollie Racist?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Let's get to it.
Okay.
My ex is a white lady, and there will be times where I take Ollie to the park, and he'll see a white woman walking, and he'll sprint over to that person, get kind of close, and then it seems like, he sort of realizes, this is not Sarah, this is not who I think it is, and then he sort of just walks away. Sarah, when she walks Ollie, she says he will do the same thing if he sees like a black guy walking with sort of longer hair. Initially, I was like, are dogs to some degree, I don't want to say racist, but, do they have sort of like, these these associations. But then you talk a bit about, like people from the military when they come home after being gone for a long time, how it usually takes the dog like a second or two to recognize them. Can you talk to why that is?
Yeah. So it's not that they aren't using vision, right? So there are some visual cues that might be Sarah, or when Ollie's with Sarah, that might be you. Some visual clues include skin color, body shape or size, like also where you might expect to see somebody or not, right? All of those things are clues. But then on closer examination, they really identify you by your smell. I mean, they know us by our smell. That's the ultimate. If somebody looked just like me but smelled different, they wouldn't think it's me.
Oh, wow.
But if they smell just like me but look a little different, I think that would give them a little bit of pause, but they would kind of believe it's me, right? So what's happening is Ollie's rushing over to that white lady and being like, yes, and then like, oh no. Does not smell like Sarah.
Yeah, I mean, I believe it. I mean, Rizzo, I've never been walked by and like there will be like some white woman getting out of a Uber or something on our block, and he's like jumping. It's like relax, or like it's like I'm walking him, but then some short white guy walks by and he's jumping on it. It's like, what? Like, who do you think's walking right now?
He's like, there's two of you.
Yeah, he's like, what the hell?
You're a twin?
Yeah,
This is the best day of my life.
yeah.
So, they're a little bit racist, but they're also really good at reading like human behavior, right? Like if dogs notice something is off, they really, really like tune into that. Yeah. Ollie gets me into trouble with this a lot.
If I'm walking around the neighborhood and someone's acting a bit off, like he'll just stop and stare. And I'm like, come on. And it's like, we are so good at like noticing the thing and like keeping it moving, and like dogs, like, when they notice the thing, it's like he just zeroes in on it. Yeah. Why are they so attuned to, I guess, things that like are even just a little bit, like even someone walking with like a limp, right? Like that's something that he picks up on immediately. Totally.
Yeah. I think kids are like this too. And for a similar reason, like they're not in our culture. Mm-hmm. Like you just said, we see somebody who's acting a little aberrant, like we move a little bit away, or we don't stare right at them. We don't want to provoke that person or make them feel uncomfortable or whatever it is. And the dog doesn't have any of that sensibility, right? So instead, the dog, stares, trying to get more information. We think it's rude. They're just trying to understand what that limping creature is doing, right? Mm-hmm. Is that a threat? Is that something, I should alert you to? They might start barking, right? Like, hey, look. And you're like, I'm trying not to look. And they're like, hey, look.
You've probably seen there's this dog who uses buttons to communicate.
Oh, yeah, I've seen this.
Been following this for a long time.
To communicate with humans.
Allegedly.
I have very strong opinions about this. I have no science to back it up, but I have very strong opinions. So one of the big dogs that does this is Bunny on TikTok. I trust that Bunny uses the buttons to say, I want to eat, I want to go outside, basic commands, right? All of our dogs do this to some. They're not pressing buttons, but they do it to some degree. You know, when your
even
dog
just
wants
looking
to
at
go
you
outside,
a certain way. Yeah.
Ollie does a thing now where when he wants a treat, he'll literally just sit by where the treats are.
Yeah.
And I know that means he wants a treat. Right. That's how he's communicating with it. Where Bunny starts to lose me is they got Bunny talking about like, I'm depressed. I need my antidepressants.
You're big sad? Why? Because Dad bye? Are you big sad because Dad bye?
This is tough to watch.
Okay, we'll do medicine.
Do medicine? I can only speak for my dog, but my dog is not having thoughts this deep. I look at those eyes and there's not a lot going on in there.
How are you communicating to the dog that you're depressed? How are you communicating to the dog that if you take this thing, it's going to make you feel better?
Yeah.
What people are hopeful about with the buttons is that their dogs are saying something they can't say otherwise. Mm-hmm. But it's not scientific to say that they are. Like, we have no way of confirming or denying it. That's the thing. It's just like every other kind of anthropomorphism we've made.
So since we did this interview, a new study came out with the big headline being, a study indicates that some dogs are able to express themselves by pressing buttons in 2 or more word combinations that are neither random nor accidental. So I followed up with Alexandra on this, and she was a bit skeptical. She said it seems to show that at a population level, so not individual dogs doing this, but the whole group, certain 2-word phrases happen more often than would be expected by chance. She also said if the buttons are meaningful for the dogs, they're using them non-randomly to actually say things, then you would expect that they would use them in all cases non-randomly, not randomly in some cases and non-randomly in others. So she said it also didn't really seem to show that the dogs comprehended at the level at least we think of comprehension, because some of the phrases just didn't really make sense. So one of the top phrases was go outside plus other and help plus other. Those don't really make any sense. And then sort of like the last caveat or red flag that she gave is that this was self-reported, which she said is just like widely frowned upon in behavioral science. There's just too much human psychology that lets us remember the things we want to and discount the things we don't want to.
I think that many dogs understand about 6 to 10 words. And that's only if you use them really clearly in very specific cases, right? They don't obviously speak a vocal language. You know, they communicate in other ways, but they're flexible enough so that they can understand a couple of words if you use them carefully in the same way over time, right? We don't usually tend to do that. I say to my dog, you know, do you want to go for a walk? Do you want to go outside? Should we go outside? Where's your leash? I'll say all sorts of things which mean the same thing to me, but unless I say them clearly to the dog, it's going to take a long time for them to learn what those mean. But now I've said, do you want to go for a walk, enough that if I say that in any context, they know what I mean. So you can't say that. You have to spell it out.
I know,
Like if you're talking to somebody else about it. So what is that? That's some kind of language understanding. But it's not the same as our kind of language understanding, right? It's like word learning. They've learned words. Mm-hmm. Like I've learned that his tail wag means a different thing if it's a high tail wag than a low tail wag. Like I can speak tail, but that doesn't mean I'm a dog, right? And because they can learn some words if we use them deliberately in the same way. That doesn't mean that they speak our language. Now, there are some of these amazing dogs, word-learning dogs, like Chaser.
Meet Chaser. Walk up. Beloved 6-year-old border collie of psychology professor John Pilley.
Good girl.
John has taught Chaser to tend an extremely large, if unconventional, herd of 1,000 toys.
And she knows the name of every single one of these? I hope.
I find this hard to believe, so I test Chaser's memory with a random sampling.
Chaser, find Inky.
Well, she got one right.
I mean, she was so cool, and she her owner John Pilley could ask her to like get a toy or touch it or do different things with these toys, right? But he spent hours every day playing with her and teaching her these words. She seemed to love it, but she's unusual. There aren't a lot of dogs like that, and there aren't a lot of people that deal with their dogs like that. They're just really different communicative specimen, but it doesn't mean that they don't understand any things that we say, and it doesn't mean they don't have a rich communicative vocabulary. It's just made up of other types of sounds and behaviors.
All right, we're going to take one more break and then finally get an answer to our question. Chapter 6, the question. Let's get to our big question. All right. Are city dogs less happy than suburban dogs?
So I'm a scientist, so I have a lot of trouble giving black and white answers. If I had to give a black and white answer, I mean, the point is there's no one kind of suburban dog, there's no one kind of city dog. And I don't know Ollie, so I don't know where he thrives. But if I had to give a black and white answer, I would say if he's used to the city, he wouldn't be happy in the suburbs. And that's because the stimulation in the city is like thrilling. For some dogs, too much, right? But I think for a lot of dogs, it is a great environment. And for a reason you alluded to, which is that you need to be intentional about his life. When you put a dog in the yard, what do you think happens in the yard? I mean, if you ever looked out in the yard, if you're living in your suburban home, some dogs are sitting there and happily watching squirrels or whatever. No dog is just running around all day, running around and excited and thrilled by themselves. They are by themselves. They're trying to find something to do. You've given them a bigger space than a living room or a crate. And there might be more going on outside than the living room or the crate, but it's still just by themselves.
Yeah.
In the city, we're much more conscious of leaving them by themselves, and we do it a lot less. We find them other dogs to play with. Mm-hmm. We go to off-leash hours. We make sure that we're not going to be gone too long because we realize that we're their social company. we think about when they need to pee, and we take them out for that, So we're so much more intentional with respect to the dog that it turns out I think a lot of their life is really improved for it. They also wind up having a lot more dog interactions. Suburban dogs sometimes will have 0 dog interactions. They might bark at a dog who passes by, who's being walked by, but they might never really interact with another dog. And I can't imagine that being a great dog life under any circumstances. And dogs are social creatures, social with dogs or social with people or both. And no dog wants to be left alone most of its life, whether it's in an apartment or in a yard. So I think people talk to me all the time about how they feel guilt about leaving their dogs alone. And I don't say that they should feel guilt, but I'm glad that they're thinking about their dog's experience because, they're captive to our situation. Now, a better scenario for the dog, in some ways, might be when they can run free, right? Like when I was a kid, we let our dogs out at night. We just let them out of the house. And we lived in a kind of suburban area where I guess it wasn't hugely populated. For some reason, we didn't think it was dangerous. Now, I would never do that. I would never do it. But we did allow my dog to have his own experiences, uncontrolled by a leash, making decisions and choices. He came back when he wanted to come back, except for the time he was hit by a car and it took him a long time to get back, and that's why we don't do that. But, he got to make choices and do what he wanted to do and cavort and run or sit, and the world was his oyster. That feels like the ideal scenario for dogs. Now, it's not safe. I don't think we should do that. But then just putting them in a yard and assuming that satisfies the same impulse, it doesn't satisfy the same impulse. I feel really sad for lots of suburban dogs. I see them, in a dog kennel or on a long lead or just left outside, and mostly they're just hugging the fence or looking right at the door, waiting to go in or waiting for somebody to go by so they can maybe have an interaction. That's no way to live a life.
So what I hear you saying is both, like you're saying, like it's like when you're talking to a doctor, it's like, I don't know what your particular situation is, right? Like, I think Ollie actually, to your point, I think he does enjoy the stimuli of the city. He loves being outside and seeing all his dog friends, and you could just tell he's excited. But then it's also, like you're saying, just living in one place or another does not determine how good of a dog owner you are. Like, just simply being in the suburbs doesn't mean your dog is going to live a better life if you're not actually actively doing anything to make sure that your dog is being stimulated outside of, like, all right, you're in the backyard, cool. Like, now you're inside.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think no dog, all dogs are different.
Yeah.
They're fearful, they're excited by stimuli. Really different dogs. Some really like playing with other dogs. Some just really want to be around their people all the time. Are you allowing them to do that in both these cases? And how much do the people think about what the dogs need and want and what they're doing right now? Most people who live in the city with a dog, if you said, right now, where's your dog? They know. The dog is like right there, and they know when they're going to take their dog out again. They're thinking about it if they're good dog people. In the suburbs, who knows where the dog is? It's a different type of connection with your dog, and it's a different type of responsibility for your dog. And for the two, I live with 2 dogs right now. It's another good example. They both love it when we go into a rural area and there's like a fenced area where they can just hang out. But most of the time, they want to just be with us on the couch, right? And one of the dogs wants to have a ball tossed again and again.
Yeah.
The yard doesn't toss the ball, right? Like, I have to be there tossing the ball, right? And so a yard is not a satisfaction. It's just the way that we grew up. And if you had asked me this question 100 years ago, the question would have been like, should we have dogs wandering through city streets? Or, should we keep them only in kennels? And like, neither of those is perfect for every dog either, right? But it's just very locally, culturally, this is the kind of dichotomy that we see now. People love to say dogs in cities don't have a good life. Dogs' lives in the city can be excellent, just great, full of other dogs, full of a lot of attention from people. Smells, imagine the smells on the streets of New York City. I mean, it's delicious, right? So it has its own set of stimuli. With a good dog person, it's a great scenario.
Well, a lot of that surprised me. I'm even questioning my initial reaction to some of those TikToks we were seeing, which is that I'm like, oh, this dog clearly prefers this environment. But as she was saying, it just wasn't used to it. It's excited about something different, exploring, running around a little bit. And then maybe the next TikTok taken a week later, it's just fucking bored sitting around out there.
Well, I mean, in some ways it made me feel better. Like, at least I am giving my dog a lot of attention.
Yeah.
My dog, personally, I know would prefer a quieter place.
Yeah.
But, at least it's like, well...
It doesn't mean you're ruining his life.
Yeah, I don't think he's not as miserable as he could be, I suppose.
Well, look, you can have Riz in the suburbs and not be as attentive. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It could go in the other direction, right? Where he could be, he would have been happier if he was in the city with someone who paid
or then he's getting
attention.
antsy and stuff because we're not doing as much.
Yeah.
I will say when we were in Virginia, even like by, we were there for a little over a week. At a certain point, maybe 5 days in, he went out on a walk and then was kind of like, I'm done. I want to go back, even though we were outside and he's with the other dogs and all this stuff. So it's kind of like once you get used to something, it's not going to be as fun anymore, in some ways.
I guess this definitely made me feel better, obviously. But I think my big takeaway from it was like being intentional about how your dog is spending their time.
Yeah.
Right? Like you said, so much of what our dogs do day to day is dependent on what we do with them. And it's not even like she talks about in her book, right? It's not just taking your dog out for a walk. It's letting your dog sometimes dictate where they want to walk, right? It's not always, I want to walk this way, we're going this way, we're doing this thing, you're on a leash. It's like, maybe this walk I'll let you lead. And maybe like we don't need to get around the block. We're just going to be outside for 30 minutes. And if you want to smell a tree for 20 of those minutes, that's fine. We can stand here for 20 minutes. So something that since I've done this interview, been considering is how can I do more things? Knowing that I'm living in the city, knowing that he doesn't maybe have as much room to run around. How can I have him explore in different ways, even if it's just going for a walk? How can I be more intentional about that stuff? Someone on TikTok said like a good way to think about it is like being outside with your dog and them smelling is their TikTok.
Oh.
So as annoyed as you are that they're sniffing the tree for 3 minutes. Like they can't watch TV, they can't be on TikTok. This is their version of TikTok. So you may think this is boring and you might want to be like, let's go. But they are enjoying themselves. And the reason you're walking them is for them. So just let them do the thing.
It's like what difference does it to you?
Yeah, it is funny to take the dog for a walk, but then be like,
and be like, this is
what I want to do.
I got a big dog, and he got trust issues. But dog, I still miss you. I made mistakes the first time, and like the last time, said you'd always be mine. Now you just a song line. You promised to me, my friend. Thank God I was born again. Make a promise to me, my friend. Thank God I was born again.
No Such Thing is produced by Manny Fidel, Noah Friedman, and me, Devin Joseph. The theme song is by Manny. This song is Big Dog by my band Maurice, and it's featuring Kenny Ning, Certain Self, and Ollie's on this track too. Our guest this week was Alexandra Horowitz. Check out her book, Inside of a Dog. We'll put a link to it in the newsletter, No Such Thing Not Show. If you're a fan of what we are doing, please give us 5 stars. We got some haters giving 1 stars, so we gotta get our ratings up. Our ratings are pretty good, but it could be even higher. So 5 stars. We'll be back next week with a new episode.
Oh, one more thing that I want to mention. People say to me all the time, you can't have a big dog in the city. You know, they can run fast, they have a lot of energy, but they also calm.
Yes.
Right? And
yes.
What do they need? Like a huge apartment to run around in all the time? No. Ollie's on the couch or whatever, right? Like that's what he's doing. So little dogs, by contrast, are much more high energy all the time.
Yeah.
And it's our smaller dog who's barking at things out the window, who's like right on the edge of, really excited. So I feel like if you have a little dog, you shouldn't live in the city. No, I'm not going to come down that way.